There's a strange kind of silence that shows up before everything collapses. Not the peaceful kind, the heavy kind, the kind that sits on your chest, presses on your thoughts, and makes even breathing feel like effort. I remember that silence well. It was late. The city outside my window was still alive with traffic and flickering lights, but inside, it felt like the world had stopped spinning. I'd just come out of another failed meeting, another rejection, another "will pass for now." Except this time, something was different. I wasn't angry, I wasn't even sad, I just went blank, like someone turned the lights off in my chest. I sat on the floor, knees pulled to my chest, trying to remember why I started any of this in the first place. The dream that once lit a fire in me now felt like a burned out matchstick. Useless. Charred. Done. I think we all have these moments, though we rarely admit them. Moments when quitting doesn't feel like failure anymore. It feels like mercy. I didn't cry that night, I just stared at the floor, quietly negotiating with myself. Maybe this is the sign I should stop. Maybe I'm just not meant for this. Maybe I'm not built like the others. But then, something else whispered back. Not hope, not inspiration, just a quiet question. What if you keep going? Not because you believe you'll win, but because this can't be the end. It wasn't a brave voice, it was tired, gentle, but oddly steady. You see, most people think the moment of decision comes with fire, with energy, with conviction. But sometimes it comes in complete stillness, in a whisper, in a choice that feels ridiculous at the time. That night, I didn't make a 5-year plan, I didn't post a motivational quote, I didn't do anything impressive. I just told myself, let's not quit, not tonight. And that quietly became the most important decision I've ever made. Looking back, I think that's when everything really started. Not when I was inspired, but when I had nothing left and still chose to stay. It was the first time I learned this truth. Endurance isn't loud, it doesn't look heroic. Most times it just looks like not giving up when no one would blame you for doing so. We all want the moment of breakthrough, but before that, there's always this quieter moment, the moment of decision. And most people never talk about it because it's not glamorous, it's not shareable, it's not pretty, but it's where the real story begins. So if you're there right now in that quiet, hopeless place where everything feels like it's crumbling, I want to tell you something. You don't have to feel strong. You don't have to know what's next. You don't even have to believe it'll get better. You just have to stay for one more moment. Because that decision, it's not small. It's not weak. It's not meaningless. It might just be the beginning of everything. After that night, I didn't wake up renewed. There was no magical surge of motivation, no sign from the universe, no message that said you did the right thing. The morning after you choose not to give up often looks just like the one before, except for one detail. You've made a quiet promise to yourself, and that promise changes things. Not everything and not all at once, but enough. Still, I'd be lying if I said I didn't entertain the idea of walking away. Every day for weeks, I looked for exits, those easy ways out that tell you, just give up and this pain will end. I thought about deleting all my work, selling my equipment, moving somewhere far where no one knew me or what I failed to become. I fantasized about simpler jobs, simpler lives, ones where no one expected anything and I didn't have to prove anything. Where I could finally rest, not just physically, but from the crushing weight of unmet potential. But here's the hard truth I learned. Quitting doesn't make the pain go away. It just transfers it into regret. You'll feel better for a day, maybe two, but soon something inside you will start to ache. Not because you gave up, but because you gave up on yourself. See, the real reason we want to quit isn't always because it's too hard. It's because we're tired of believing in something that hasn't yet become real. But belief isn't just for the victorious. Belief is for the broken, for the ones crawling through failure, for the ones who've heard no so many times their identity starts to crack. And the only thing stronger than that kind of pain is commitment in the face of it. Some days, I hated how slow everything was moving. I saw people around me succeed with ease, launching things, getting recognition, seeming like they had it all figured out. And there I was, still building, still fixing, still waiting. But I realized something subtle, almost cruel, yet liberating. The right path often feels the worst at first, because it doesn't offer instant rewards. It offers something better, transformation. You don't get stronger by succeeding easily. You get stronger by failing and refusing to stop. There's a kind of growth that only comes when the applause has died down, and it's just you, alone with a choice. Do I move forward even if no one sees me right now? Do I show up for a future that hasn't yet arrived? That's the question that followed me every morning after that decision. And though I often hesitated, I kept saying yes. Not loudly, not bravely, but consistently. And over time, those small, quiet yes moments built something no failure could destroy: self-trust. Not confidence in outcomes, but trust in myself to stay in the game, even when it hurt, especially when it hurt. I wish I could tell you there was a turning point, a dramatic moment when things suddenly made sense and everything started falling into place. But real life rarely gives us moments like that. Instead, what happened was quiet. It was a Wednesday. The sky was overcast. One of those gray, heavy mornings that makes you want to crawl back into bed. I was staring at the same blank page I'd been avoiding for days. My coffee had gone cold. And for a moment, I felt the usual wave of doubt creeping in again, but instead of turning away, I whispered to myself, just write one line. That's it. Not a chapter, not a paragraph, just a single line. So I wrote it. It wasn't good. It didn't feel inspired, but it was real. And in that moment, I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel accomplished. I just felt anchored. Because for the first time in a long time, I did what I said I would do. And that tiny act, that one line, became the start of something else. We often think progress is measured in leaps. But the truth is, most breakthroughs are just a series of tiny, boring, consistent acts of self-respect. No one clapped for that line. No one saw it. But I did. And when I returned the next day and wrote another line, something strange began to happen. The fear was still there. The doubt was still whispering. But they had less power because I was moving. A few weeks later, I received an email from someone I hadn't heard from in years. They had stumbled on a piece of mine, one I barely remembered writing, and they told me it helped them through a really dark season. That message didn't change my career, it didn't pay my bills, but it did something even more valuable. It reminded me that even when you feel invisible, your effort is not wasted. Your quiet consistency leaves fingerprints on your craft, on your character, and sometimes on people you may never meet. We think showing up only matters when it leads to success. But sometimes the mere act of showing up is the success, especially when no one's watching, especially when it would be easier to walk away. I started seeing these small moments everywhere, not as proof that I was winning, but as evidence that I was still alive inside. And that mattered more than any result. Because when everything feels like it's falling apart, what you're really fighting for isn't your dreams. You're fighting for the part of you that still believes in trying. Once you reconnect with that part, even just for a few minutes a day, the whole world will feel less heavy. Not because the weight's gone, but because you're stronger. There's this strange stage that comes after the breakdown. It's not triumphant. It's not glamorous. It's quiet, humbling. That's when you realize no one is coming to rescue you. No perfect job, no magical relationship, no lucky break. Just you in the wreckage, staring at what's left. And strangely, that's when life gets real. I remember sitting on the floor of my tiny apartment, sorting through old notebooks and drafts I had once abandoned. There were sketches of dreams I had outgrown. There were ideas that had aged poorly. But buried between the lines, I found something else. Pieces of me I had forgotten. I used to care about this. This made me feel alive once. I wrote this before I knew what failure tasted like. And in that moment, I didn't feel regret. I felt permission. Permission to begin again, not from scratch, but from truth. See, rock bottom has a way of stripping you down to the essentials. When you've lost your image, your plan, your certainty, all that remains is what's authentic. And that's a powerful place to start. I didn't rebuild my life with a 5-year vision board or a new business plan. I rebuilt it with small rituals. Morning walks without my phone, cooking something simple and nourishing, calling one person I truly missed, saying no more often, even if I didn't have a good excuse, writing without an audience in mind. These weren't moves, they weren't impressive, but they were mine. And they helped me remember that my worth isn't something I have to prove. It's something I protect by showing up for myself again and again. One day while walking by the river, I stopped and looked at the sky. It hit me. I hadn't cried in weeks. Not because I was repressing anything, but because I had finally allowed myself to feel safe again. Not in the world, not in my career, but in me. I can trust myself again. That thought was louder than the fear had ever been. And slowly the question shifted from how do I get my life back to what kind of life do I want to build now? Knowing what I know, having lost what I've lost, and being who I've become. It wasn't about chasing what I had before. It was about creating something more honest, more grounded, not bigger, just truer. I used to think survival was about toughness, about pushing through, keeping busy, pretending everything was fine. But now I know. Survival, real survival, is about softness, about sitting with the wreckage and saying, I'm still here, and that's enough for today. There's a kind of strength the world doesn't talk about enough. Not the kind you show off on resumes or social media, not the kind that makes headlines or earns applause, but the kind that lets you wake up and still believe in something, even when nothing has gone the way you planned. That's the strength I've come to cherish. The quiet strength of showing up, of choosing again, of loving your life even when it doesn't love you back yet. Sometimes healing doesn't look like a sunrise. Sometimes it looks like doing the dishes when your heart's still broken, like replying to one email after days of silence, like taking a shower even when everything feels pointless. Tiny acts of reclaiming yourself. And that's the thing. You don't have to make a comeback. You just have to come back to yourself, your breath, your space, one step at a time. These days, my life is simpler. There are fewer people in it. My calendar has more blank space. My mornings are quieter, but there's room now for what truly matters. Not every day is bright. Some days I still question if I'm doing enough. But now I know how to answer. If I showed up for myself with honesty, that's enough. The world told me I needed to be impressive, but the truth, I just needed to be real. I don't want to live a life that looks perfect but feels hollow. I'd rather live one that's imperfect, but mine. And if you're listening to this, maybe you're in that place too. Maybe everything's falling apart or already has. If that's you, let me tell you something I wish someone had told me. You're not behind. You're just rebuilding. And you're allowed to rebuild slowly. You're allowed to rest. You're allowed to grieve what didn't turn out. But please, don't give up on yourself. The world may not understand your pace, but the person you're becoming, they're worth waiting for. Final words. So here we are, after all the noise, the trying, the failing, the falling, you're still here. And maybe that's not the happy ending you hoped for, but it's the true beginning you never expected. From here you're free, not because you have it all together, but because you finally let go of needing to. Keep going, quietly, gently, and when in doubt, come back to yourself. That's where life starts again.